discussing Mr. Ravi, Economics at the Asian Development Bank Bangladesh. She will be joining us shortly. I now hand over the session to Mr. Perry.
Right. Well, welcome. This was going to be, or this is going to be the most interesting session. I hope more people will join me. I'm not going to say much. I've been asked, or I was instructed I will have only 5 minutes to introduce the session. The topic actually is huge, inclusive, sustainable development. And I can tell you from my own experience as a practitioner in development, the concept, I don't think being able to, we're still wrestling with the concept of development. What does it really mean? Does it mean economic, social, spiritual development? I think there is, of course, the consensus. It means about human welfare. And what does inclusive mean? Again, different views and theories about inclusive. Some say inclusive development is how development benefits others who benefit from the fruits of development, whether it's economic. But inclusive also means opportunities. How can people participate in the development process by expressing their views, or in an economic domain, how they participate in the labor market or create opportunities for themselves. Something relatively new is this concept of sustainable development. What does it mean? It means development that is perpetual. But here, what it implies is of course, development or the fruits of development that we enjoy that can also be enjoyed by the future generations. So looking at the environment. And more so, especially now that we have conclusive evidence that we are heading towards the cliff because of climate change. Humankind always faced natural hazards, but as a result of industrialization, there is a lot of evidence that humans have contributed to the change, the climate change and to global warming. And this path is self-destructive. So naturally, we are now looking at development that is not only good for people, it's also good for the planet. Different ways of going there. And again, we are still looking at learning what's happening globally and how that can be applied at a scale. Now, without taking too much time, I think we can go straight into the 4 presentations. I think the 4 of them are very interesting. I quickly went through those 4. One looks into rural development. Other one is a sort of a common community resource management. Again, a very interesting concept. We also have a presentation on formalization. And then there is another one on multilateral development banks, particularly in the South, what role they can play. And there are quite a few. You have the Islamic Development Bank, the Asian Infrastructure Development Bank, and what role they can play in development. So let me now invite the first, I'll just go it according to the agenda. Our first presenter is Mr. Raisul Millat Tafkat, right?
Yes.
Sustainable Common Pool Resource Management through Community-Based Enterprises. I believe you have 10 minutes. And I've seen the presentation. There are like 20, 25 slides. I don't think you will be able to cover 20. I don't know, you have 20 slides, but there were some that had 20 slides. You will be able to do that in 10 minutes. So what I would advise this to all the presenters is maybe you can skip the methodology, the research you have done. Those who are interested can maybe read that in your paper. You can maybe in an introduction, you can quickly talk about it, what the research was about, but not go into too many details and get to the findings and maybe recommendations. That way we can stay within the time. And I think we have a time paper as well. I see 5 minutes. You'll be reminded.
Could we be presenting standing or sitting?
And our discussant is here.
No problem.
Bye. Thank you. Welcome. So I just introduced the session and asked our first presenter to make that
Shall I
presentation.
start?
Yes, please.
Okay. Good noon, I guess. And I'm really happy that our chair has actually built the context regarding climate change and other thing. And I was actually planning because it's not possible to go through all those slides. And so I want to tell the story, what we actually tried to do, and what are the lessons that you can take. And it's already in journal publication, so whoever wants to go through it can always access it through that. So I'm here with my also colleague, Mr. Jafur. He was also co-author of this paper. So the story and the rationale was to conduct this study was like whenever we are going through all those vulnerability researchers, and we were finding that in case of recommendation, people were saying that we need to enhance the community resilience. That term found I found that this was very recurrent, and I was trying to focus on that what does community resilience actually mean. And when I went to I dig up the literature review, I found that okay, there are lots of papers who are suggesting regarding the community resilience, but there are too little or a very few papers who are actually suggesting how to build this community resilience or how to capture this community resilience, because we didn't actually find the universal framework or how to define the community resilience. In terms of resilience, you can easily find the infrastructure resilience and other sort of resilience, but community resilience is still not really in a very universal or universal framework based capture. So our study focused more on like what are the examples in front of us in case of Bangladesh or maybe near in South Asia, which is promoting or which is somehow relevant with the factors which we have identified through literature reviews that these are connected to community resilience, and how that intervention relating its activities and impact with the resilience building. So we actually developed this conceptual framework through a lot of after going through a lot of literature review, because as you can see here, community resilience has been defined. Sorry for the it's not very clear, but I can explain like community resilience has been captured through the lenses of resource robustness, social capital, economic opportunity, information and communication, community competence, active agent or leadership sort of things. So different literature has suggested these as factors of community resilience, and we try to actually capture these through different literature. And what we try to do is like we went to find a model that can relate with this community resilience. We are considering this model as CEA, Community Enterprise Approach. You can also find it by the name of Daud-Kanti model. So this has started in 1997. Since 1997, with the help of an NGO, this initiative was taken, and what they try to do is to utilize the common pool resources. In this case, it was floodplain. So in term or during monsoon, the floodplains actually get inundated through like water, and it's very hard to do something individually. So if you need to utilize it, you need to utilize it collectively. So as due to the monsoon, the private lands, it turned into a collective resource or common resources, and how they actually utilize these common resources through this enterprise approach, that's the most interesting thing. And they have been doing it for last 30 years, and we went to capture that model through different data, like they have existing lot of literature, they have existing media reports, they have existing documentation. And we were very lucky that when we started doing this research, we also found that one government agency called BARD, Bangladesh Academy of Rural Development, they were also doing a research uh, on the result or on the they try to compare what were the efficiency in terms of agricultural production and cost effectiveness in projects where this CE approach was implemented and where it was not. So they were actually doing such a research, and we tried to collaborate with them, and they shared their survey, and from that survey we tried to come up that okay, which questions could be utilized to. So out of their questionnaire, we came up for 27 questions that actually indicate that, okay, through this question, we can capture the community resilience, what we already identified from different literatures. And from this survey and from this survey, we tried to do index building that's called community resilience index building. And when we tried to do that, we found that this sort of a result arrived that if you compare with the project area and outside the project area, out of like on these issues, which has been the factors of community resilience from our findings, we found that okay, in the project area, it's showing the score like in terms of resource robustness, they showed 0.84. In terms of for outside the project, it was 0.50, social capital 0. So when we got this result, we went to understand that why this differ. So we went for the FGD focus group discussion, KII, and also direct observation to understand that what were the reasons behind this scoring. So okay. So when we went those intervention areas, we asked people that actually what's happening in reality. So in that area where the project initiatives that has been taken. So, as our chair said, I tried to escape all those technical things, but it's pretty easy. Like I talked about the data things, and then there were the indicators and dimensions, and the we try to build a CRI, community resilience indexing, and we try to validate through validation and triangulation. So there were a lot of limitations because when we went back to literature, we found that there are a lot of community resilience index, but they actually was not built on some universal framework. Rather, they focus more on expert opinion, and many different weight was imposed on different factors to really compare the CRI. What we did in our research, we actually chose to go with the weight sort of thing. So that was one limitation that we really didn't try to segregate or try to impose bigger weight to something or to compare with other things. So we try to come up with that what would be the picture when we rely or impose the equal weight to all those factors we have come. So if you are more interested, you can go through this paper. It's already in there. online, and maybe there you can get more idea that what was the case, because it's due to the shortage of time, it's very difficult to pass on the idea of community enterprise. And we are also planning to build further research on this to really how to capture it quantitatively and come up with some more recommendation that could link to sustainable development recommendation thing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Before we go to the next presenter, a very quick question.
Sure.
When you looked at whether this was present or not,
Yeah.
these various attributes, did you find relationship with how they had managed disasters? They were better at managing, or they were able to reduce the risks arising from disasters?
Yes, we actually considered several cases. Like in the latest flood, there was in 2024, there was a flood in Kumilla Feni place. So that happened due to cloud outbursting
Right.
thing, and how they actually managed, because that time they had that project there, and we got a very visual evidence that how what happened in the project area and what didn't happen in the non-project area.
So they were cases of positive.
Yeah,
and you
they
wanted
they
to identify
in places where the CEA was present, they are still existing, and those where it wasn't present after that flood, many of the aquaculture and agriculture has got disastered, and like now they don't have any evidence now.
Okay, thanks for the question. Yeah,
Yeah,
please.
just before we do the next presentation, would you kindly share with us, like, we see the scoring there.
Yeah.
So like, what are the two or three key messages or findings that you'd highlight that we can take from the analysis there? I've
Sure.
gone through the paper, but this is for the larger audience.
Yeah, sure.
I would like to kindly share. Very briefly, huh? Within 1 or 2 minutes.
Okay. Uh, okay. I don't know why this is not.
I think we can click share here.
Yeah, but it was already shut.
Yeah, I think we're good. And then present here. Resume slideshow.
Thing got hanged. Stop shuttering.
Sorry about that. These things always happen. Always happen. New technology is always the case. I didn't say this at the beginning. Actually, I'm quite happy to be among young people. Normally, I spend time with people who are even older than me.
Okay, I mean,
It's kind of boring, so it's good to be with you. Helps me to re-energize.
Okay, sorry if I have got it correctly. So you want me to explain one score or two score?
No, not score, just the key highlights of the results
Okay. So
in 2 minutes.
yeah, sure. So in terms of like active leadership factors for project and non-project area. So when we went to the project area, due to this project thing, so there a lot of local people has received this leadership capacity. They have built this leadership capacity, and now if any sort of disaster, any sort of shock is there, they know how to react. They know how to really manage the shock by maybe mobilizing, by or maybe managing, or maybe where to reach. So this leadership capacity has been developed through this initiative. But where it doesn't exist, the project doesn't exist, there is no such thing, because people are not really following to anyone. Or also those people who knows they might take some charges or they might take some moves, they are not very confident because they are not practicing those things. So these are the gaps we found. And maybe in terms of social capital, I have said I focus on economic development. So the project which I am talking about, the Daud Kandi model, it has actually created the opportunity to produce like 400 crore to 500 crore of aquaculture or fish production annually. So due to this high volume of production, they have actually become economically resilient also. So they have this financial ability and opportunity to really spend those things, financial capacity. But those in those areas where this sort of enterprise is not existing, there are very less scope for economic opportunities, because this is not only about aquaculture. With the aquaculture, the feed production comes. With the aquaculture, the transportation comes. With the aquaculture, all other linking backward and forward linkages are there. So, and it has developed the whole community as a resilience factor. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
No, no. Okay. So we now move on to the second presentation, which is about reforming multilateral development banks. We have someone from a multi-development bank here. I deliberately did say Southern Multi-Development Bank, but I don't know, ADB, do you see yourself as South or?
Whatever I say will be off record.
Okay. Good. So we're very glad to have him here. So over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Rosemary. And a very good afternoon to everyone here. My name is Najiba Mohammed Altaf. I'm from the Center for Policy Dialogue. And I'm also joined with one of my co-authors here, Montajul Janna. And I don't know if this name is unfortunate, both reforming and Southern MDBs. Both reform and multilateralism are both on a decay, as we all know, I think. I have, unfortunately, 62 slides, so I'm really going to try and wrap this in 5 points that I tried to type out in the morning, which I have here with me. So this study, when we conducted it first in early 2024, it was really the revival of the multilateral development banks. There was this robust discussion that was happening after the Prime Minister, Mia Mottley. She had brought up climate finance and climate change, and she called for changes or reforms for multilateral development banks. However, these reforms that were really called for focused on the traditional, what we traditionally know as multilateral development banks, World Bank, Asian Development Bank. So these were the center. Other banks in this African Development Bank, even they were included. What was not a part of them were the newer actors, the new kids on the block. What was also not a part of that discourse was a new group of recipients, graduating LDCs. Now you may argue LDCs is not really a criteria when we're talking about concessional financing, but LDCs and graduating LDCs in that perspective assumes that when an LDC graduates, they are in a circumstance that allows them to smoothly transition given their macroeconomic factors. So they have enough revenue to GDP ratio, they have enough tax GDP ratio, they're able to sustain their debt servicing amounts, which is not really the reality. So here I have a couple of literature slides, which I don't think is a necessary part of the story that I want to tell here today. Development financing, climate financing, all of these multilateral development banks have sort of become taboo words in recent years. We saw that with the dismantling of USAID and bilateral providers who have really done two things from our layman perspective, which is they have, number one, reduced their budgets because they're accountable to their own taxpayers. And so if they're spending money on other countries' development, how are they accountable to their own taxpayers? That was the question. Very elementary question, but still valid. Second was the definition of development financing or official development assistance, ODA, fundamentally changed. Budgets were now, the new budget lines were added, climate change and climate finance, but they were being pulled from existing resources. So it's not that the pool of finances increased. It's that directions or priorities had changed depending on who was at the helm of the ship. So these are some statistics. ODA declined for the first time in 5 years since 2020. ODA flows to LDCs were already abysmal. They were below, in fact, we reached pre-pandemic levels currently. And official development assistance, the very financing that was supposed to support these countries in the development process, became increasingly expensive as loans outpaced grants. So it's since 2023, when we first picked up the discussion on the MDB reform agenda, there were 5 pillars really. Maximize capital efficiency, add capital, expand mandates, transform your country engagement, and achieve private finance mobilization. And it's not like things haven't happened. There has been progress. There has been progress on all all funds except for one, really, that wasn't so visible, which is private finance mobilization. So in this entire development financing landscape, what also shifted was the rise in the critical role of Southern players. So World Bank and ADB and all these other traditional banks, they came out of the Bretton Woods system, but there are players outside of it. One of which is the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, AIIB, China-led. Then there's the Islamic Development Bank, which a lot of people would be confused. They think it's so old, 1977. How can it be not one of the traditional players? But it is a Southern. It is born out of the South. It is for the South. This is what they pledge. And I have a point written here, which is a lot of reviewers have given to me, which is a lot of the development financing that Southern MDBs provide to the recipients is not really ODA eligible. But the fundamental concept of ODA eligible was built on bilateral providers and the development assistance that they provided. So the old world players. So why this study? This was a new angle. Graduating LDCs one world, which is something, a country like Bangladesh for us. And in this graduating LDC comparison, we brought in Nepal as well, two countries. Same, but different. And I'll tell you why. It's because both of us are in this mid-reform agenda. We went through upheavals. We are both going through fiscal stress, but for very different reasons. We have tax GDP ratio that is suffering, and they are going through an operating expenditure budget that exceeds their capital expenditure. So they're spending more than they're earning. And so this was one part, and then we wanted to see these two rising. One is an old Southern MDB player, Islamic Development Bank, and how have they evolved in the last decade or so, and the new kid on the block, AIIB. I want to talk about NDB, New Development Bank. Maybe many of you have heard about it, but their portfolios are so minimal. They still very much babies, if I may say so in very layman terms, that it was not enough for us at this very moment to look into. Unfortunately. Okay, so the questions, I'll just go briefly. These are the two axes we really tried to look. And the second axis that we wanted to look, the framework we used was how do we do more with less, which is fundamentally we have less resources. How do we do better? So we have something called GPDC already. It is a very lengthy, very old framework for making resources more effective. And we tried to put that, but I'll go through the findings. So I'm going to go through the findings really quickly. This is the storytelling part. What did the Southern recipients, or countries like us, what did we expect to begin with? And what did we get? And what did the LDCs get from their perspective? So, as a recipient country, we thought banks out of the recipient side would understand our needs better, number one. They would give us less policy conditionalities. Project approval processes would be faster. They would be more amenable to the conditions that we want. So, that's one. Reality was a lot different. The legacy playbook was still being played. You see, AIIB's biggest shareholder was still China, and priorities were really derived from the priorities of the creditor. Same goes for ISDB. A lot of its priorities were derived from who was at the helm, Saudi Arabia. And so this is what we really experienced when we interviewed both stakeholders in Nepal and in Bangladesh, that at the end of the day, AIIB wasn't really seen as a key player alongside World Bank, and ISDB was only known for trade financing and fuel. Another expectation. Now, this is not so much an expectation, but reality of what we got. We thought that the Southern MDBs would see us as the borrower, us being not the government, us being the people, the citizens, because that's who the people are borrowing. Like, we are the ones that are borrowing for our development. But while on paper, the beneficiary and recipient is written on paper, in reality, it's the government of Bangladesh and government of Nepal that we're seeing as the borrower, to whom these banks were accountable, very much like their legacy brothers. So, and then of course, because of that ownership claim on development, who really owns the processes, transparency and accountability was really accountable to the government, not to the people. So a lot of times AIB and ISDB, we wouldn't see the reports. If you go online and you search up a project report, you may not find it, most likely. Okay. I'll get to the meat of the things. This is a scope of engagement. This is a huge table that I'm not going to get into, but I'm going to start by telling you 5 points. Number one, cost of borrowing. We all thought with less policy conditionalities, maybe financing would be cheaper. So when Bangladesh and Nepal signed loans, they signed with, secured offer, SOFR rate The secured overnight financing rate replaced the LIBOR for loans. At the time of signing, it was around 0%. And what happened in reality was that increased exponentially to this chart. At 2023, it reached 5.3%. And AIIB had actually offered to Bangladesh government bureaucrats the option of hedging, but because they didn't understand the concept of hedging, today we are now burdened with a cost of borrowing that we cannot handle. Right now it's reduced in 2026, it's down to 3% something, which is still, when we signed the loan, it was near zero, and now we're entering as a graduating LDC into an environment where we're paying more than we bargained for. Second thing, AIIB and ISDB do not offer concessional financing. They are all about balance sheet optimization. And a lot of this has to do because of sources of funding that they have. It looks a lot like the World Bank, and it looks a lot like the ADB, and they're more focused on optimizing their balance sheets, so returns on investments per se. This was another aspect. Third is, of course, transparency and accountability deficit. This is, again, a repetition of the previous part. It's because of who they identify as the owner of development resources, or who they are accountable to, which is the government. And fourth, ISDB has an office in Bangladesh. The only reason they have it is because it's a regional hub for Asia. AIAB doesn't have an office in Bangladesh. They have a regional hub in Dubai, and we don't know why. Honestly, I don't know if it's because it's great beaches, but besides that, fifth part, which is they're less connected because of their lean, clean, green approach to, countries. I'll take 2 minutes left. Okay, I'll take you. They have a problem with their approach to countries, which is they don't have a country framework. They're not on the ground. They're disconnected from the stakeholders. Oftentimes what happens is these new banks, they rely on the government for example, grievance redress system, or they rely on, if they're co-financing a project with World Bank, for example, they'll rely on World Bank to do the dirty work in terms of grievance or anything else. So these are the issues. I'll go straight into the LDC's perspective. I'll just run down. LDC, the only bank, surprisingly, that considers LDC as a criteria is ISDB, maybe something that the traditional banks could learn from. But again, income per capita is an inadequate measure for the banks to gauge the recipient country's level of socioeconomic development and assign loans. That was another finding that we got. So this is what happened since we conducted this study. ISDB has launched a concessional fund for their least developed members. Bangladesh, out of the two graduating countries, has actually officially requested for a deferment. Nepal is internally facing a lot of pressure, which is validating the fact that these countries are under a lot of fiscal stress, that they are not under the circumstances that we would theoretically like them to be in terms of smooth transition. And finally, the last thing, ODA fell with the largest contraction in 2025, which is reflecting the ODA reality. So the 5 recommendations that we have is really that these are all based on the points before, which is they should introduce a concessional financing window. They should diversify their portfolio of investments, and establishing country offices has more value than just, creating nice fancy offices. It really brings you closer to the stakeholders. The stakeholders recognize you. Bureaucrats have directly told us that it is easier for us to communicate if there's a face to the name, And third is that Southern MDBs may fare better in terms of performing within the country if they co-financed with the traditional parts, because Southern MDBs, unfortunately, are seen through a geopolitical lens. AIIB, for example, in Nepal, was seen as an arm of BRI, for example. ISDB is not even referred to ISDB by Bangladesh government actors. They're seen as just ITFC, trade financing for fuel, and that's it. And then number 4, a country strategy approach to move away from the project approach. This is, again, the balance sheet optimization. They want to show what's working and what's not on paper, and they want to go through a project approach that fits their own line of work. It would be better for the recipient country in terms of predictability to have a country strategy. And 5th, the most important one, which is, again, links back to GPDC, mutual accountability and transparency. Proactively disclosing information to all stakeholders, including non-state, and providing a mutual accountability mechanism. So there's a lot of details in here, and hopefully this paper is going to be published very soon. So Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Najiba. Very interesting. I know you have questions. We'll come to that later. I thought AIIB, they have an office. I met some people from AIIB. They gave me cards and there was an address there, but maybe it's a project office. The second thing was ISDB. Do they charge interest rates? Isn't it an Islamic bank? Well, we can get into that later. Perhaps now number three. So determinants of regarding the formalization, right? Of Saida Maliha Tasni, you're a master's student. Good. Do we have the fourth presenter here?
She's online.
Okay. From Pakistan, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Um, Good afternoon, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. This is Shahida Malhid Taslim from the Department of Development Studies, Bangladesh University of Professionals. And maybe I'm the junior most here, and I'm apologizing in front of you that for my very novice presentation. As this is my academic research, I will be focusing on the methodology part and the findings as well. So as we can see that my presentation topic is determinants regarding the formalization intentions of the informal entrepreneurs, empirical evidence from Bangladesh's e-commerce ventures. So there is a thing that I want to urge that in Bangladesh, there are more than 80% of the labor force who are connected to the informal economy. And what is the informal economy? Hans Singer actually said that the informal economy is a giraffe. I mean, it is an animal in general, but you cannot describe the appearance, the bigger neck of it. And Lothier actually, on opposition, he said it is an unicorn. You can find a lot of literature regarding informal economy, but you cannot find it in front of your eyes. And hence, it becomes a very important discussion to talk in this field, because in considering the 40% of the economy and 80% of the workforce, if we consider the informal economy, this massive portion is remaining in uncertainty, and it is actually creating a challenge before inclusion and sustainable development. So if we move forward, our presentation outline will be considering our problem statement, our research question and objective methodology and the results. I will try to make it as short as possible. So just for a quick recap, if I just ask you to think who of them is a part of the informal economy, just you can assume it. In my left hand, I have a farmer, and in my right hand, we have maybe a well-organized person. Surprisingly, if we set some kind of standard, for example, the farmer, he has a trade license and sells organic foods in Dhaka, and the suited booted man who has no trade license and sells skill development courses online. Here comes the change that as we identify the informal economy with struggles, backwardness, it actually challenges that, because when we are talking about the informal e-commerce seen online marketplace, when we're talking about the online economy, it actually challenges the notion. And surprisingly, when I actually asked 10 of my friends about the about this same question, who lives in which form of economy, 8 out of 10 people actually say that the farmer is the part of the informal economy rather than focusing on their characteristics in this place. So, as studied in the literature, that it is coined as vulnerability, struggles, and backwardness. And in Bangladesh, the majority of the labor force is connected to the informal economy. So, it is our but we tried to actually see if what is their perception or staying under the informal economy, and what is the barriers, what are the reasons they are not actually getting engaged in formalization process. So if we move forward, considering the characteristics of International Labour Organization, when we are steadily moving forward the online-based economy, it actually challenges the informal skill sets and operating in small-scale dynamics. It is said that the informal economy actually formulates under small scale. But if we consider the informal e-commerces, they have a larger access to the market. They can reach beyond their certain region, and sometimes they can reach global attention as well. So depending on that, our research question was, what are the factors that are associated with the unwillingness of the formalization of the informal e-commerce, and does the legal environment support informal e-commerce's transition into the formal economy? And regarding that, our research objective was to identify the factors and determine the most influential factor shaping the decision-making process of the informal entrepreneurs. So our conceptual framework, it has a theoretical base. We basically focused on the public choice theory, and the rationale behind selecting this theory is that we all are a national actor. None of us are benevolent, and we actually act depending on our leverage. So if we consider our politicians, if we consider our bureaucrats, they are also rational actors, and considering their leverage, they engage in corruption. And as we can see from the conceptual framework, that the entrepreneurs, they have registration barriers, financial barriers, tax burden that creates higher transaction cost and sustaining cost, that creates a rational choice of them to avoid formalization process, and thus they search for low cost alternatives. For example, informal digital marketplace that we already have in our country, for example Facebook, for example Instagram. And I will just skip this methodology part. In short, I have focused on a quantitative methodology, and my estimated sample size was 345, depending on the ROE-MS formula. And furthermore, for the data collection process, I have focused on a systematic random sampling. First of all, there was no specific list of how many people are engaged in the informal e-commerce. However, ECAD showed that there are around 2,500 e-commerce ventures in Bangladesh, and depending on that, we reached 345 respondents on Facebook, because it is the highest. This is the biggest marketplace considering the informal e-commerce, and the response rate was 48.74%, unfortunately, and our total responses was 168. What we actually tried to do, we went to Women and E-commerce Entrepreneurs Facebook group, and another named Bangladesh E-commerce Development, when 120,000 members, and performed a systematic random sampling of sampling fraction 7, and we collected the data. And we focused on multicollinearity firstly, because we tried to see if there are any strong correlation between the independent variables. And at the same time, we focused on descriptive statistics and logistic regression. So for our regression model, we have focused on the unwillingness as the dependent variable, and we have focused on market demand, access to finance, tax burden, registration barrier, social network, and individual factors, for example, online services for information, awareness of formalization benefits, number of business partners, year in operation, and total sales. If we move forward, most of our variables were binary in nature, and social network is a Likert skill. It was derived from different literatures we have added here respectively. And this is the result segment, the demographic background. As we can see, the respondent profile. From the systematic random sampling, we can see that Dhaka has the most possible respondents here. We can see a similarity between the male and female ratio. Surprisingly, the age limit is the age brackets considering 18 to 34 has the most possible respondents here, that we can say that they are more likely to engage in online activities. And from the business profile, we can see that the physical products and the homemade products are more available in online marketplaces. And if we move forward, this is the multicollinearity test and the VIF model. We can see that the independent variables that we have selected, they are not strongly correlated to each other. And therefore, for regression analysis, we were able to select all of them. And it actually provides a more significant result regarding the concept we are talking about today. And the result, we will make it very short. First of all, we can see that we have three models of regression. Firstly, we incorporated all the samples. Secondly, we incorporated only Dhaka-based e-commerce. And finally, we incorporated female-owned e-commerces. So when the government provides necessary information, which is available for the entrepreneurs online, the entrepreneurs are more likely to decide to formalize their ventures. So this is not only the case of Bangladesh. If we focus on the literatures, India shows a similar pathway of formalization. And if we talk about Russia, Russia actually makes the formalization process more forced. It is forced upon you if you want to engage in any sort of online based e-commerces or online based transaction. You have to have a formal identity to at least participate here. And secondly, respondents aware of registration barrier are also more likely to formalize because they are better informed or networked with the system. Here comes the concept of patron-client relationship between the proponents. So when a person is knowing that there are some registration barrier, there are some regulatory barriers as well, they are more likely to connect themselves with the patrons they have, and they use some forms of clientelism and get engaged so that they can formalize their ventures. And negative thing that I viewed in my study, it is that it is more likely that the female entrepreneurs who run the e-commerce business for a long time might face reduction in the willingness to formalize their e-commerce ventures. They here the female proponents, whereas they should formalize more often due to their higher experiences in this field. So we can see a divergent situation here, and we can see that the female entrepreneurs are more likely to get away from the formalization process. One common thing that came is early marriage. Another thing that came, that they have to engage them with productive, reproductive, and social work, which also works as a burden behind it. And finally, with less financial support from formal institutions, the e-commerce business are still likely to get to formalized in future because they already have some informal ways to collect capitals for finances. And this is the result from the descriptive statistics. We can see that when the range of followers in Facebook, they are below 10,000 small scale e-commerce venture actually gets 20,000 average sales in Dhaka. Medium entrepreneur, can I get 1 or 2 minutes, please? Medium scale entrepreneurs get 1,22,000, and around a high range of followers usually get 5 lakh Taka. And finally, this is the upgraded version that we are willing to study in future. We are willing to incorporate some qualitative measures here, and we can see that the politicians, bureaucrats, and entrepreneurs, they are actually influencing each other in decision making. that is actually creating higher transaction cost and further creating a rational choice towards lower cost alternative. And finally, my recommendation includes that the information of formalization online should be available. Another thing that I should add that the informations are still available, but these are not accessible for all the peoples. And at the same time, the government should incorporate the other people residing near Dhaka city or the rural people so that they can get engaged with online based economy and they can actually increase their livelihood strategies. And we also urge that the sample size is only 160. If we increase the sample size, we can mitigate the sampling fallacy. And finally, which I have told earlier, by a qualitative and qualitative exploration, we can triangulate the findings. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Is it I thought after all these years, because I came across this debate, formal and informal, I thought by now we should have resolved it, but I guess it hasn't been resolved yet. It's about the definition, about the definition of informality, what it means really. One quick question before we move on to the next presenter. You are looking at whether a business is formal or not, whether it's registered, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that was your main, I guess, criteria. All right, good. So now we move on to our final presenter. She's joining us from Pakistan, right? Islamabad. Miss Farah Naz, and she will be telling us about drivers of rural development using special analysis. Over to you, Farah.
Thank you so much. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much, everyone. Yes, I'm here. I'll be presenting the identify the drivers of rural transformation development using spatial analysis, the case of Pakistan. First of all, I would like to thank the support of Dr. Abaitullah, Dr. Shuja, Dr. Pirola, and my institute for this study. So since this is about the rural transformation, so you can see the rural transformation here. It's embedded in agriculture transformation, and ultimately broadly it's embedded in structural transformation. But I work is majorly focusing on rural transformation, capturing agriculture and broadly part of the structural transformation. But before moving onward, we really need to know that what actually and how we are actually defining the rural transformation development in my study. So basically, it's the reconstruction of the rural economies and the regional patterns through the rapid industrialization, through the urbanization, through changing cropping patterns and employment structure transformation that can ultimately bring a very good change for the households in their rural areas. They become more productive, they become more efficient, and they become commercially oriented along with this phase of the rural transformation development. So since there are variations in the inherent capabilities of the different rural areas, so that end result in the differentiated degrees of the rural transformation. Like some districts may be ahead of the other, some may lag behind, some may having a normal pace of the rural transformation. So ultimately, when there is differentiated degrees, so there comes a regional development imbalances, but that require a coordination and balance. For the sake of that, it's very important to study the whole set of the process. Also, that this whole set of process is not static by nature, rather it has special characteristics which I'll make you understand with the as I walk you through my presentation. So since my study is majorly it's basically for the study of Pakistan. So in understanding the features of rural economy in Pakistan are very much important. Pakistan rural economy face land fragmentation issues, land inequalities there, plus the policies are quite distortionary and protectionist policies. So these are all affecting the rural economies. We have had the green evolution in the past, but there again was the debate of the land productivity versus labor productivity. We are having, as far as the facilities are concerned, we are having the regional disparities on account of irrigation facilities and so on. There are issues relevant to the public procurement that may crowd the private sector. There is limited fiscal space available in Pakistan for the research and development. Our rural economies are not much resilient to the changes, and they're we are a little bit behind the horticulture products, so we are importing them as well. If we look at the different indicators, we can see that the sectoral share of agriculture in the GDP, it's around 24%, which means it was 24% in 2004, which declined to 19% in 2019, which doesn't mean that the importance of the agriculture has declined, but the intensity has been, the share has gone down a little bit. But along with that, if we compare with the share of non-farm employment here, so we see that share of non-farm employment has increased. So these are the different indicators that are symbolizing that rural transformation is happening in the agriculture as well, and in the non-farm employment side, which is the non-agriculture side as well. Moreover, the urbanization is also happening to increase over the period of our study. And if you look at the share of the crops, it's declining, but on the other side, the share of the livestock, it's increasing, which making livestock a very important part of the agriculture. The intensity of agricultural land uses is also rising over the period of time. So through these, some of the indicators and statistics, we can see that the changes are happening. Now, changes are happening, but what actually drives those changes is a part of our study. But before that, let's quickly have a look that were actually driving the rural transformation in other countries. So in like India, China, Brazil, it's basically the credit that is helping towards the rural development transformation.
5 more minutes.
Okay, and Afghanistan and Nigeria, we are having irrigation, and we are having natural resource endowment, financial development. These are the certain drivers of the rural transformation. But in Pakistan, there is no such study on drivers has been conducted, so this study is going to fill this gap. And we will see that how infrastructure, credit, irrigation, climate change, and education are actually going to bring an impact for the rural transformation development. We'll see these spillover effects as well, and direct and indirect effects. A quick look at the policies that are trying to bring a change. There was market reforms happening, land and infrastructure focus changes in 80s and 90s. Then there was in mid 20s there was some infrastructure and credit related moves by the government. By 2010 faces some we have floods and income shock, so we are not as progressing as we want to be. And later on again the mechanization and specialization moves have been started in the history of Pakistan, so that we can move from stage 1 to stage 2 and up to stage 3 and onward. Higher the stages, better is the rural transformation, better with the prospects of the development. This is what we mean by stages. Since I'm left with less time, so I'm skipping. The development theories also, all the development theories are rightly focusing rural transformation and keeping it as a very important path to development, especially the new structural economies. It enforces that institution policies and investment has an implications for growth and productivity gains. So this is a very important subject to study. Based upon this theoretical discussion, we have developed the theoretical framework linking the different drivers to the rural transformation. For rural transformation, we have developed the index using the 5 different indicators. This is my study area where I took 92 districts. These are the districts where we have the significant role of the ruralities. Some districts has not been taken into account because they were purely urban, some data missing and stuff. These were the basically 5 indicators on which I developed the index and on which the impacts of these drivers has been seen. Since theoretically I have taken the districts, so districts are lying nearby to each other, so we cannot overlook the spatial dimension to my study. So that's why I checked for the spatial autocorrelation and came to know that there is spatial dependency being present in the study. And in order to measure the spatial dependency, I use a Queen contiguity for my polygons, and I have decided over the model. And the model which I'm using in my study is a dynamic spatial development model with time fixed effects. It's capturing both temporal and spatial effects. These are the results to my study. The very important results are present for the model number 4, where we can see the lag term of my dependent variable, which is positive and significant. That shows that the persistence of that shows temporal persistence. shows a special existing special life. It means that the whatever is happening in one district is also having the implications for the other districts. And if we look at the drivers and different variables, so we came to know that irrigation and education are the most significant drivers. Here, S2 and S3 are symbolizing the stages.
Farah,
In our
sorry
study,
to
we have
interrupt you. You have what, 1 minute left. If you can wrap up very quickly. Sorry to rush
yeah,
you through this.
yeah. Okay, stage one is my base stage. So if I look at the significant variables, you can see that these variables are quite significant in stage two, and they become even more significant with a more degree in stage three, which means that as you move towards the higher stages, the impacts increases further. Plus, there are such as spillover effects as well. So let me conclude that rural transformation development in the previous period significantly influences the current rural transformation. So it means there is temporal persistence. Spatial spillover effects are also very much evident as RTDI in one district correlate positive with the neighboring districts. And once if you want to count down that which drivers are much important, so education drivers and education and irrigation are the more prominent drivers. So what I recommend out of my study is that we need to have the long-term rural development policies. We need to promote the regional collaborations for the in order to have the benefit from the inter-district development synergies. And we need to improve the access to the education and irrigation system. And whatever the development strategy we need to be taught, that has to be integrated development strategies. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Farah. So we covered four very different topics. And as I mentioned in my introduction, the theme of this session is actually very broad, but I see how well these four different topics fit into that broader theme. We looked at resource management, we looked at rural transformation, we looked at the role of financing, and also we looked at what was the fourth one?
Informal digital.
Informal digital, to how to improve that or move towards formalization that can result in higher productivity. So all very interesting. Unfortunately, we didn't have a lot of time because for each of those studies, we need probably an hour or so to really understand what was being explored. Again, thank you so much, all four of you, and appreciate your flexibility with, you had to rush through your presentation. Now is the time for our discussant to provide some thoughts, and you have what, 10, 15 minutes? And then we'll have an open discussion.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to all the presenters here and online as well. Very good papers and topical papers. And as our Chair just pointed out, that the themes of both papers cut across four issues, but these are very interrelated, and this actually shows that this development it's not only about the resources, it's about the institutions, incentives, and coordination, and so on. So let me just give my brief thoughts on each of these papers. So I'll start with the first paper on the community-based enterprises and resilience in Bangladesh. So I find this paper is a very strong and policy-related paper, and this paper makes a very important point very upfront that resilience is not just about infrastructure or technology, but fundamentally it's also about institutions, collective action, and governance of common resources. How do we govern common resources? That's very important. And I like the conceptual anchoring of the paper and the use of this multidimensional community resilience index, but there are some methodological aspects to it. So empirically, it's saying the outcome the election case is it's a convincing one. Especially the contrast between this CE managed aquaculture and the non-CE that the paper shows areas in the 2024 floods. And the paper is also showing that there shows very clearly that the collective governance reduces vulnerability not only by raising incomes, but by enabling coordinated responses under shocks, which our presenter also mentioned when he was sharing this key highlights of the findings. So that being said, I have some few constructive observations. As we say in the research, that there is always scope for improvement in our research work. So first on the causality that the paper draws. So what the paper it refers to a sort of RCT style or quasi-experimental design. The analysis is largely comparative. So it would be helpful to clearly address whether this CEA and non-CE communities differ in pre-invention the characteristics such as leadership quality or NGO presence. So this will help to draw the causal conclusions. And second, on the measurement issue, like equal weighting of the resilient dimensions is understandable that we see from the paper, but a simple robustness or sensitivity check would increase the confidence of these results. So that's on the measurement issues. And third, on the issue very important about is scalability. So the success of this CEA, this appears tied to the succession of these interventions, and I think the paper would benefit more of the explicit discussion of whether such collective governance structures can be sustained at scale, especially in areas with weaker social cohesion. So these three things that would be my suggestion on causality, on measurement, and on scalability. But overall, I find this paper it's a very good one, an interesting one, and this could be further improved. And then next on to the reforming the southern MDBs. Do we have any journalist friends here? We don't have. Okay, good. So whatever I say. Oh, okay. Okay. I will bribe or something to not report it to my office. Okay, fine. So, okay. So as I'm from an MDB, so whatever I say, it's my own personal capacity and not associated with my institution. And this is off the record completely. But this is a piece of research work. So let me first tell that this is a very good paper and this makes a very good contribution to this MDB reform debate. So congratulations to the authors, and this sort of shifts the attention from this legacy MDB to southern MDBs. It's a very interesting concept about when this paper talks about AIID and ISDGs as these cases. And I think this one of the good strength of the paper. It's on the analytical framing that it has on the GPTC development difficulties principles, and I think this exercise is carried out periodically, and I was also part of this exercise, I think, for 1 year back. So this is very also interesting. And the comparative case analysis that it has done with Bangladesh, with ISDG, and Nepal, with the IAB is particularly, I think, very good one, and drawing from this KII. And I also think the paper makes a very important conceptual point in questioning GNI per capita as the dominant metric for determining lending terms, especially for countries in the graduation transition. And because we know that, for example, in Bangladesh, we satisfy the graduation criteria, but if you talk about the readiness, the vulnerabilities, it's still there. So vulnerabilities persist despite this rising income. So there are questions about it. So with that being said, there are few constructive suggestions. First, the paper is rich, but somewhat dense, what I have seen, that sharpening the synthesis of the paper could actually strengthen the policy message that comes from the paper. So, like what southern MDBs do clearly better than the legacy MDBs, if they do anything better. That is also the question. Okay. So, and where they clearly underperform, I think the paper also discusses this a bit, but actually connecting this or contrasting this would actually help strengthen the policy message. So that's the first one, the strengthening this policy message. Then the second one is some recommendations like introducing concessional windows. So for coming from an MDB, I know that this will require shareholder level political decisions, and this is very difficult within that MDB structure, like having the board call, then having this discussion and changing the decisions. So it might help to distinguish reforms that are technically feasible in the short term from those that are structurally constrained, like what we're saying. So that's the second recommendation I would put forward. And thirdly, third one is that this mediator moderator framework. This looks good, but it could be referenced more specifically in drawing conclusions. So overall, this is a very high quality and agenda setting paper that is directly relevant for Bangladesh's post-residency strategy. And one thing that I also would like to say that from my interaction from my interactions with the government, working with the MDB, what I've seen that is every country, when with every MDB, when we discuss with the government, we have our own priority issues of the institution. Like for example, ADB, we have 8 priority sectors. Whatever we are going to do, we're going to invest in those 8 priority sectors. So perhaps all the MDBs have such strategic priority areas. But when, as a government, as a Bangladeshi national, we are going to seek support from the MDBs, then I think as a counterpart, I'm talking from the government perspective, that is also important that you ask what is actually needed. Okay, so because no MDB is going to give you support, like if you give Bangladesh support, then what is not needed? If support is not needed, then they are not going to support. So the message that I'm going to give here is that as a country, when the government counterpart is dealing with, this is very important that we ask support in where we need. If we don't need any support, then don't increase the debt burden, plain and simple. Okay. So I know that this is from the MDB reform perspective, but I just wanted to put this message from the country level strategic engagement, because this paper also mentions it. Then the third paper on the formalization of informal e-commerce. So this paper also tackles a very contemporary issue on the informality debate that we have and the sort of discussion going on. And what works very well is the focus on informal e-commerce, and this is actually very topical one, which challenges the traditional view of informality as low skill and market excluded, as the paper pointed out. And the findings are intuitive but important. Like access to formalization information online, this paper makes a strong point, and it says that strongly increases the willingness to formalize. And the registration barriers matter more than tax rates. The paper also points out that, and gender dynamics also shape the formalization decisions in nuanced ways. One thing that I see that the subsample analysis that says the Dhaka-based ventures and female-owned businesses is particularly valuable, and finding that longer operating female entrepreneurs are less likely to formalize. Like, well, I have had enough of this. I don't want anymore. Okay, so it actually raises very important policy questions, I think. So that is, I think, it's further probing. And my also one concern is about the sample size. I understand that maybe it's part of your academic research work, part of the thesis work, but going forward, this could be an issue as well, especially for the regression analysis work. And this also limits the statistical power and may explain why some theoretically important variables are very insignificant in this paper. And finally, the role of platform governance that you say about the Facebook rules, payment gateways, and logistics constraints. So these are like underexplored, and so it could be likely central to the incentives of informality. And but despite these issues, I think this is a very timely and policy-related paper. So thank you for bringing out this important research. And then finally, to this paper on spatial drivers of rural transformation in Pakistan. Our presenter is online. I hope you can hear us well. Yeah. So this paper offers sort of methodologically rigorous analysis of rural transformation, and it links very explicitly accounting for time, persistence, and spatial spillovers in the context of Pakistan. And it uses this dynamic spatial urban model in the paper we see. The two aspects stand out. First, this stage-wise analysis, and it shows that education and irrigation matter more at advanced stages of transformation. And that actually moves the debate beyond this generic policy prescriptions. Second, also about this identification of spatial spillovers, particularly what the paper points out to this irrigation, and that actually reinforces the need for regional coordination rather than district by district interventions. And we also see that in the analysis, the separation of livestock from crop-based agriculture in the RT index is also well motivated given Pakistan's structural change. So that being said, just a few constructive points on the paper. The insignificance of the infrastructure, banking access, and climate proxies, it likely reflects the spatial heterogeneity rather than the irrelevance. So further, that will be worth exploring, and exploring in the context of localized or zone-specific analysis. It really could uncover these masked effects. Then there is another point that paper makes about the negative credit spillover. It's intriguing, but I think it could be further worth explaining. It's got sort of a bit of under-explained in the paper, and this could be also due to a reflection of governance or allocation inefficiencies, and so deserves deeper investigation and interpretation as well. And finally, one point about this climate change, and it's proxied narrowly in the paper, like the rainfall variability or flood exposure might better capture the environmental constraints on rural transformation. So overall, this is a very good paper, and with lessons that travel well to South Asian context, including Bangladesh. So with that being said, if we take all this paper together, these papers actually remind us that inclusive and sustainable development is ultimately about institutions and incentives. So it's not just about resources or projects. So I congratulate all the authors for your presentation and hard work. And as we always say in the research work, in whatever forum you present, there is always scope for improvement, and there is always further scope for a better research. So I'll stop here. Thank you so much, and over to you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Round of applause for Rajan. We also say, we ask the author what they could have done differently. Not that we do that, but generally, we always reflect back and see what could have been done differently. So now let's open up for Q&A. So we can take questions or even comments. It doesn't have to be comments. You can even share jokes, no problem. First, introduce yourself and then your question, and also please mention if you want to address it to someone or you want to make a general comment, and then they will get a chance to respond.
I'm Abdul Rajiv, currently working as a research associate at Sarnem. I asked one question to Sayeda Maliha Tasnim. So although the informal economy is prevalent across South Asia, countries like Maldives and Sri Lanka have relatively high level of formalization. Have you considered any cross-country based case study in your studies?
আচ্ছা, লাগবে না মশলাটি। হ্যাঁ, আমি যখন আর কি আমার থিসিসটা পারফর্ম করি, যেহেতু পুরোপুরি কোয়ান্টিটেটিভ ছিল, আমরা কিন্তু অতগুলো ক্রস কান্ট্রি দেখতে পাইনি। জাস্ট একটা কান্ট্রিতে খুব মাইক্রো লেন্সে জিনিসটা দেখেছি, কিন্তু থ্রু আউট দ্য লিটারেচার আমরা যখন জিনিসগুলো দেখা শুরু করি, তখন কেবলমাত্র মালদ্বীপস না, শ্রীলঙ্কা, মালদ্বীপ, পাকিস্তান, ইন্ডিয়া, এই সবগুলোর কেসই মোটামুটি দেখা গিয়েছে। আর এটাও ট্রু যে টু সাম এক্সটেন্ট বাংলাদেশ আর পাকিস্তানি ইনফরমালিটির রেটটা অনেক বেশি। হ্যাঁ, ইন্ডিয়াটা তাও কোপ আপ করছে, কিন্তু Still less than 80%. Still less than 80%, I would say.
Thank you very much.
Let me translate that for the English speaker. No, just joking. I think I understood a little bit, but good to compare why it's high there. That was good.
So, Thousand Khatama, a student of Department of Economics, Jagannath University. I have two questions. First one is for Soyada Malia Abu. Women who have operated their e-commerce business longer are actually less willing to formalize. Do you think staying informal becomes a deliberate, rational, long-term strategy for them? And last question is for Raisul Milat Sakwat Bhaiya. Your study is based in Laksham, Kumilla. How well do you think the CE model would work in very different settings like coastal Sundarbans communities or northern Chor areas? Thank you.
So should I answer?
Maybe just respond.
Okay, so during my presentation, I have already said that in case of female, they already have triple burdens. For example, they have productive role, they have reproductive role, and they have social roles as well. So considering the informal e-commerce formalization, our determinants are also some kind of burdens. We are talking about tax burden, we are talking about regulatory barriers, we are talking about institutional barriers. So overall, for a female, considering all these barriers and coping up with them is actually creating a pressure. So considering the gender dynamics here, I guess for the female, the barriers are actually creating pressure, and they are more taking rational choice to stay in the informal economy. That if I stay in the informal economy, I don't have to take the extra barriers, extra burdens from the government side or the institutional side. Yes.
Thank you. It's really a pretty good question. I want to answer it by like this. When we went to do this research, we found that the CEA is actually like a software. So when we dig more, and we found that they actually replicated this model with other concepts like beekeepers, like honey enterprise formation, like the tat or cloth enterprise thing. So yeah, and the whole thing, the concept itself actually captured all those things, the ownership building, the leadership point, and other things. So it's actually not related to aquaculture or flood painting, rather it's a concept that can be utilized in many other things that has a commonalities or collective action is needed. You might also, if you're interested to know more, you can search North Bengal Honey Enterprise. That's also some example by them, which they have utilized the CA concept to do this thing. Thank you.
Tasbisman Fatma. I'm from North South University. So my question is for Ms. Najiba. Bangladesh didn't hedge against SOFR when Southern NDPs offered the option, and now faces much higher borrowing costs at graduation. So who do you think bears responsibility for that? And I've got another question. Given that major shareholders may not want more transparency, how optimistic are you that Southern MDBs can actually reform themselves in a meaningful way? That's it. Thank you.
Respond now.
I think I can respond
Okay.
before we get the question, but excellent questions. Thank you for that. Who bears the responsibility of paying back the loans we took? I guess the bearing ultimately comes down to the taxpayers, us. And unfortunate case, that is the truth. It gets the loans that we have accumulated over the past 2 decades, we are paying for at this very moment. Our debt servicing ratio to GDP is has exceeded beyond expectations. If I'm correct, debt servicing rates have exceeded 100% of revenue. So we are paying for it. This is the accountability part of taking these development loans, which is the ownership aspect, which is why we use the GPDC framework. There are four principles to understand how development financing can be viewed. And one of them is country ownership. And we sort of played around the term when we said country ownership. What does that really mean? Does that mean the government's ownership, or does that mean the people's ownership? So ultimately, it comes down to who you view as the country. And for the second question, how meaningfully can Southern MDBs really deliver to meet our needs? We have seen a shift. It's not like we haven't. Previously, I can see before 2023 when we were doing the study, initially we saw that the Southern MDBs financing instruments that they were offering, which goes to your question as to why is ISDB seen as offering SOFR-based loans. SOFR-based loans is their benchmark. They don't offer loans. They offer sukuks, which is their Islamic financial certificate. So the SOFR rate plus a spread. This is what they have used as the interest rate, which that is not how they refer to it. It's a different word that they use. So ISDB in 2025, and they recently introduced a concessional financing window. So they are actually, and ISDB has also included LDC identification as one of their criteria for distributing loans. So they are responding very well to the needs of recipient countries. So there is potential. What has changed though is the development financing landscape itself. So ODA as we know it is changing, and the financing landscape needs to be more diversified to address the diversified needs that are emerging. So Southern MDBs can, if you're looking at it through the lens of ODA only, it may not be appropriate. But if you're seeing them in the bigger scale of things of development financing, they are playing a critical role in it. Thank you. I hope that answers it.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Mamtajul Jannat. I am a Senior Research Associate at the Center for Policy Dialogue. I'm also the co-author of the Southern MDB Reforms paper that my colleague just presented. So I would like to address to Mr. Rubul Islam sir. You were talking about what do these Southern MDBs do better, if there is any. So it's interesting because we in our about like 50 KRIs through Bangladesh and Nepal, and in both of the countries, Plancom and Finance Ministry, and through these MDBs, through our interview, we found some interesting aspects that came in both countries that they do better. One of them was faster operation and less operational process. It means that I just found that they are less bureaucratic in their process, operational process, compared to the legacy MDBs. And also they have a stronger infrastructural focus compared to the legacy MDBs. And they are, in many cases, their loan instruments are more flexible. And another thing that we found was that they are creating, to some extent, alternative financing sources to the common ones that the legacy MDBs are creating. But this also comes with issues because faster operations and less bureaucratic process also creates weak safeguarding mechanisms. And we also found that strong infrastructural focus, yes, but that's the main focus that they have currently, and that kind of limits the sectoral scope of these MDBs. And the flexible loan instruments, that was one overwhelming aspect that we got, but that also meant that they're less transparent about, there is less transparency and open knowledge regarding these instruments and how they operate. Also, the alternative financing sources, yes, they are creating those, but at the same time, they are not really cheaper than the ones that the legacy MDBs are provided. I hope that kind of addresses your. Thank you.
Any more questions, thoughts?
Hello, I'm Supa from North South University, Department of Economics. My question is for Sirda Maliha, ma'am, that you mentioned in response to one of OSR's questions that you classify businesses as formal if they are registered and informal if they are not. However, your data was collected from Facebook platforms like, groups like We and other platforms. So my question is, did you examine whether this introduces any bias or effects of novelty, your findings? Because, Facebook and all the people over there are informal, right? And if you handpicked organization, then don't you think the research has overlooked randomization idea that we have somewhat studied in econometrics, I guess? Yeah, that's it from me.
So if I give the reply, due to the presentation constraint, due to the time constraint, I could not add that. But yes, we had set some sampling criteria as well. And this paper, the sample was collected, I guess, throughout a year because we tried to reach the people. We actually examined them. We tried to we actually try to compare them with the sampling criteria, and only the eligible ones are participated in the survey, and we collected data from that. That's why my respondent list is so small. It's only 160, but we have reached around more than, I guess, 400 to 500 people. Among them, around 350 was like without any sorts of formalization processes. So yeah, I think the number that we have here, 160 or 166 that we have collected, they all actually meet the sampling criteria, and I can assure you that there is no sampling bias from my side. That's necessary information.
Saullah from Southeast University and Department of Economics. I have one question for Ms. Maliha Tasneem. According to your research paper, for sampling, you have chosen Taoyamini method, if I'm not wrong, where sample error is 6%, I guess, 0.6%. But according to the Taoyamini method, the justified sample error is 0.05%. Could you just give us the justification of choosing this number of error?
Okay. So I have chosen Taruyamana's formula depending on the literatures. So initially, when I was in the methodological phase, I was trying to see if there are some people who actually performed a simple random sampling in this particular sector or considering the online-based e-commerce. So I got an exact paper following the Taruyamana's formula, and I followed that so that I can get a similar.
I was asking about the sample error.
Okay, the sampling error, I guess I cannot fully explain that to you. I guess I need some more study based on that.
Any more questions, thoughts? Our presenter from Pakistan didn't get any questions, so let me ask her a question. Maybe you can tell a little bit more about education, because you found that as a driver of rural transformation. One would imagine, with more education, people move to urban areas for jobs. I mean, that we have seen also happen, which means there's less burden. There's this excess labor in rural areas. They move with, I guess it's a generational issue as well. So how did you find that as a driver of rural transformation?
Yeah, you very rightly pointed out. So education theoretically and both and according to my research, there are different channels through which it's affecting the rural transformation. When people get educated, number one, they start incorporating the more technological knowledge into the agriculture sector. So in that cases, the productivity in the agriculture started to enhance. And once the productivity in agriculture started to enhance, it means that the productive labor is more there. So there is some spare labor as well, where who being more educated, suppose don't want to be part of the agriculture anymore. So with the transformation, not only the agriculture from the rurality started to develop, but also the non-farm sector also started to develop. The second thing is they started moving towards the off-farm sector. So that is why we measure the rural transformation with the five different indicators. So on in the one indicator, which was about the share of high valued agriculture. So there is the role of the agriculture for enhancing the productivity. The second one is share of off-farm employment. Again, the people who are no longer being part of want to be part of the agriculture sector. They started using their capabilities in the off-farm sector. Third, we have also have the indicator of urbanization, like people may started moving towards the urban centers if they got a job. So all this together, and we are having two other indicators as well: land use and livestock. So education role is a driver to the every different indicator. So ultimately, making the rural transformation a whole holistic process. And like this was the contribution of my study, which is different from the other studies. That some studies only consider the one angle or one indicator, but I try capturing all the different indicators so that ultimately we could capture not only the driving force impact of education and other drivers in one aspect, rather in all the different aspects.
Thank you very much. That clarifies things for me. I think we have run out of time, and I won't be able to conclude. These are very important studies. In fact, what I find, those three, I'll come to yours as well. The three actually, in a way, what I see, the common sort of a thread that I see in those three are that you're seeing certain models, how they work, and it has policy implications. So does yours, the paper. What I find a bit difficult, I mean, I have been in development for many, many years, and what stage can we say that these things have been proved empirically in the past about, let's take formalization. We heard Rabi also talk about incentives. But I've seen that in practice as well, incentives where it works, how you reduce the burden of formalization, whatever the definition might be. So it helps in that formalization process. And of course, it then can enhance productivity. Now, at what stage or when do we stop demonstrating that effect so that it becomes accepted as a good practice, that you don't need to prove anymore, and simply it can be taken up by governments globally, that they don't first need to test this first. Oh, does it really matter? Do we have to make formalization easy in order for us to design a policy? Because we do spend a lot of time. I grapple with that. I tend to focus a lot on policy, not on policy making as if you have to put on paper, but also policy execution. But there is a lot of work happens on whether these things can be proven to be effective or not. But there are lots of things where, at least among practitioners, we know that they have been proven to be effective. So you don't necessarily need to do more research. As researchers, of course, you have to look into it. There might be certain aspects of it. So I'm struggling with that. I don't have any answers. I think it goes to not only this particular presentation about the role of the community when they manage themselves, they have that ownership, they have the incentive again that comes up to manage things better without sort of externally engineering this whole process. And on rural development, again, I'm sure there's lots of literature on what works, what does not work. On your paper, of course, I think this is not being recorded, right? Also,
I am recording now.
Okay, I also work for a multilateral institution, but we deal in grants and technical assistance, so I don't have to answer about loan. But then, credit always had, historically, it is because makes people very emotional. And there are views on credit. Is it good? It's bad. And sometimes, whatever the evidence may be there, people, they can justify, they provide their reasoning and say, oh, it's not good. I mean, if you look at Bangladesh again, I don't want to get into this debt sustainability, indexes and all that. But if you look at Bangladesh, the debt burden is there, according to IMF's and World Bank's latest assessment. Yeah, it has increased, but it's not huge. Yes, debt servicing has increased. I think the challenge, to some extent, Rabi actually alluded to that. The challenge is also about ownership. I would imagine a lending institution, not only multilateral banks, I think any bank would not simply give out money if there was not a need or a demand for that. Of course, commercial banks would use one criteria is whether they can actually repay, which is a good proxy of whether you invest or you lend money or not. I think the challenge that multilateral development banks face, because as a development bank, you're not a conventional lender. You're also providing technical assistance. So in a way, you're an investment banker, but in reality, you're not, because you're not taking risks necessarily. You're not making investments. Say, let's invest together. If there are no returns, we share the losses, which is where the Islamic model comes in. It would be interesting, but obviously they use a different model for costing the lending. It may not be purely halal, I suppose. I should say that, but it is difficult because you don't know the cash flows. I understand in Islamic banking they use various types of methods for calculating the price and the return. And I don't think it's the government, it usually is the state as seen as the borrower, because governments change, it's the state. And state, I presume, means people as well. So that's a distinction, but I don't know in the contracts whether they write the state versus and a multi-development bank getting into an agreement. But is the difficulty. I think it's the role. Ultimately, it's the government that has to make that decision whether it's worth borrowing. And there are different options for developing or least developed countries. They don't have access to markets that they can raise cap, or their domestic capital market is also very weak. So the only option they may have is to go to a multilateral development bank. And then that does raise questions, but you have to do your, that due diligence has to happen. You need to have projects that are well thought out. And then financing comes later. I think the demand has to be there. There are a lot of, I think globally, they're talking a lot about the reform, the responsiveness in terms of financing needs. And if you look at the financing needs, they're huge. We look at what those 6 to 7% of GDP for developing countries, they need to spend extra in order to meet those development aspirations or sustainable development goals by 2030. And that's huge. And some of it, of course, will come from the multilateral development banks. But the idea which is critical, and that's where also maybe the multilateral development banks can do more, is how that can be leveraged to create financial markets, stronger financial markets domestically. And number two, how do you leverage it to attract more investment? That is difficult because you have a relationship, a lender-borrower relationship. You're not looking at leverage. And this is not just me saying it. Even those who had the multilateral development banks, they feel they can do a lot more. I've heard the head of the World Bank say that not the current one, the previous one. In fact, he was incentivizing, he challenged his staff to create leverage, whether it's through IFC or others, not to look at how much they are borrowing, how much money they are lending to countries, but how that money which is being borrowed is leveraging, how does it crowd in other forms of financing, including private sector investment, because that's ultimately what countries need in order to grow. With those few words, let me once again thank the presenters. I found those papers extremely interesting. And as I said in my introduction, we are the topic, the theme that we have is very broad, but then as we went through the presentation, I could see how it fits into this very broad theme, how we look at inclusion, we look at sustainability, and all those four papers have those elements. And also importantly, it has an important policy dimension. And I hope whatever learning I had today, I will take it out and through our various agencies, including my own UNDP, we will advocate for at least for policymakers to look at this research, what is coming out of it, so that it can help them to shape their policies and programs in the future. And I would also like to thank you all, the audience, for coming here. As I promised beyond, this was going to be a very interesting session, and I hope I was right. And thank you so much for all the questions. Very interesting. With that, we conclude.
Yes. Okay. Sandwich quotation of the we don't get any. We this is by the Maliha please give her an extra copy as well. She can go through it. Maybe you give it. Okay, Miss Naziba Muhammad Afran. No. Thank you so much. Thank you. This one. Oh, now on this side. Yes. One group for it.
We have another certificate for you. We'll send it to Pakistan. We'll mail it to you or electronically.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Group photos. Farah, please stay on the screen. We have group photos, so you're not mixed out in the book. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Don't do my phone. Then volunteering to the you forget. Yes.
This is the advantage of being young. We can bend down. We can. You get what he said.
সামনে কেউ যদি বসে থাকে সামনে দিয়ে সামনে সামনে তাকাবো
Brings us to the end of Breakout Session 21. On behalf of Salem, I'd like to extend a sincere